I'm Chris Bussing. Welcome to my channel. It's committed to helping more people create a life of freedom and impact through success in tech sales and the pursuit of self-development. Our guest today is the man. This is by Tech Sales Tom. And he's got an incredible TikTok with 206,000 followers or more. And that doesn't happen by accident. He helps people start and grow their careers in technology sales. And he was a former teammate of mine at Google Cloud. He also worked at Amazon and Microsoft. He's been at all the heavy hitters. So today we're going to talk about how to break into tech sales with no connections or experience like he did and work for the best of the best. So make sure to check out Tech Sales Tom, by the way. That's linked in the description of this video. Connect with Tom Nuara, if that's cool, Tom, on LinkedIn.
Yeah, sure.
And guys, like and share as well. It helps, if people want to learn about breaking into tech sales, it's useful to them. So Tom, let's get into it, man. But how's your day been? I feel like you're probably grinding today, but what's the day of life look like?
Pretty good. Yeah. So actually, this actually just reminded me, I'm going to hop on my live as well, but no, the day's been going well. So actually the past 7 or 8 months, left the W-2. So most recent W-2 was at Microsoft. So as a director level IC covering data and AI services, including like the exciting Azure OpenAI services. And then left that to kind of focus on my own things for a bit and did a bunch of traveling too. We bought like an RV the winter prior. So yeah, did a lot of traveling, cross country trips, a lot of fun, made a lot of great memories with the kids. And then actually exploring a couple new potential opportunities. So if I get any updates on that, I'll let you know there.
Yeah, it was cool when you came into Austin, your old stomping grounds with the RV, and I got to see your whole family. So what a beautiful family, and just really enjoyed crushing some pizza and catching up. And
yeah,
so, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. Yep.
Yeah. Let's dive into it, guys. We're going to dissect exactly how to, break into tech sales step by step. So let's start with like square one. Someone finds out about the opportunity of tech sales because they went to TikTok and they saw Tech Sales Tom. They're like, this guy's hilarious. He's making crazy money. He's driving Teslas and other cars. He's crushing it. And I want to get into tech sales. Where do they start from there? Like, what's the first practical thing you should do when you realize I'm a banker, I'm a teacher, I'm coming out of college and I realize I want to get on this path? What should I do first?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the first thing is really just kind of getting a base understanding of the industry, what the career path looks like, what the different roles are. So for the vast majority of people, they're going to be getting in at the ground level as a sales development representative, business development representative. So that's like the entry level role. You're doing a lot of cold calling, cold emailing, prospecting. So it can be a bit of a grind, but you learn a lot within that role, and all these skills that you learn are transferable. So you're going to be using these skills when you move up within the career itself. So the first thing for sure, gain that base level of understanding. There's a ton of great free material out there. That's what I did with my TikTok. I even created a playlist. So it was get into tech sales, and I kind of went through step by step in terms of what you would do at a high level. And then there's some paid, there's paid content out there as well. If you want some more coaching or more guidance on the process, I ended up putting out a free course that was pretty much aimed at people that want to get into an SDR, BDR role. And then that's called Tech Sales U. I have that linked in my link tree that I guess will be probably linked here somewhere. And then from there, let's say if you already are in the tech industry and you want to pivot into that approach is going to be a little bit different than if you have no tech experience or sales experience.
I was just muting because my puppy's bouncing around being crazy. But guys, check out Tech Sales U. I also I appreciate everyone who showed up in the comments already. We got 7 people live. I'm sure that will grow, and excited for folks to see this as it floats out in the YouTube feed. But check out Tech Sales U, free course that Tom made. Probably put your blood, sweat, and tears into it, sharing everything you know. If you had to high level paint a picture of what the course covers, and we're going to dig into tactical steps and strategies to break into tech sales step by step from resume to interviewing, but high level paint a picture of the Tech Sales U.
Sure. Yeah. So high level, it's self-paced. It's 5 weeks. I kind of broke it up. You can certainly finish it faster. But it's broken down in terms of understanding the tech industry, understanding the career path, going into actual interview tips, going into preparing for the interviews, like doing some developing some basic prospecting skills, LinkedIn prep, resume prep, and then also kind of like going over a framework for actually like getting referrals and applying for jobs and tracking that, because a lot of people don't realize that first job is the most difficult one to get because you don't have any prior experience. But I always tell people you need to frame it as like your first sale that you're trying to make, and you're trying to sell yourself. So just like in tech sales, you're not expecting to close every single deal that you're working. It's important to kind of go into this whole job search knowing that you might need to put in 80 or 100 applications before you get that. So I go over kind of like a framework and process to kind of structure your job search process. That way, not only are you not getting disappointed, but also you're putting yourself in the position to best negotiate a top compensation package with multiple competing offers, hopefully.
And that's the key, is going through a program like Tech Sales U or working with someone like Tom. You can not just break into tech sales, but do so in style where you have multiple offers. You can negotiate and get a higher starting pay than you would otherwise. So Artur, if I'm saying that right, is asking what's the site called for the course. And now I linked Tom's TikTok, which also has Tech Sales U linked in there. But Tom, what is the actual site if they want to just go right to like Tech Sales U?
Yeah. So if you actually just go to, let me double check, techsalestom.com. That's like where I pretty much all my links for my socials. And yeah, actually Tech Sales U is the first link on there. So if you go ahead and click on that, that's going to be the easiest way for sure.
Okay. Put that in there. Perfect. So what are the, can we talk about the function of the SDR role at a high level, some of the skill sets, and then we'll get into things like resume, LinkedIn, networking, interviewing, but what's the SDR role really about?
Yeah. So the SDR role really is about, you're at the beginning part of the sales funnel, right? So for people that are new to, let's say, B2B sales, and your only experience or exposure to sales is B2C sales, it's a little different. So B2C sales is business to consumer. So that's when when most people think about sales, they think about B2C sales roles. So that'd be like, car sales, insurance sales, cell phone sales, for example. So there's a sales rep and they're selling to an individual. B2B sales this is what we're talking about here, professional sales, software sales being kind of, one of the umbrellas there. So it's a much more complex sales process. There's multiple people involved on the customer side. And these sales processes take a longer time too. So you're going to have a team of individuals that are going to help close these deals. So the sales development representative is one of them. So they're typically going to be the first person that's going to be reaching out to a prospective customer or prospect. They usually do a mix of qualifying both like inbound leads. So a prospective customer might fill out like a form, or they might attend a webinar. And they want to learn more about the product offering, or you might get like a lead from marketing, for example, from an event or something that this individual attended. The other thing that their SDRs are going to do as well is they're going to be working off of a list of companies that would potentially be a good fit for the product, and they're going to go ahead and be doing calls, emails, and LinkedIn messages out to those individuals to go ahead and try to get a conversation going. So they're at the beginning of the sales process. They're generating interest, and then they're handing off the prospect, if they've shown interest, to the account executive, and they're the one that's going to take it from there and hopefully close the deal. And really, this role allows the account executives to kind of better manage their time, right? So instead of them having to prospect all the time, they're focusing on actually closing deals and progressing them, because that's a whole nother workload itself.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is like the purpose of the SDR role is to get more conversations going and increase the effectiveness of the account executive and lead to more revenue at the end of the day, which is the lifeblood of a business. What's the career trajectory of an SDR, right? Like, what's the next step? Is there flexibility in where you can go from the SDR role? Like, would love your thoughts.
Sure. Yeah. So the next step for the career path. So the most obvious next step is being promoted to an account executive. So that's the closing role. So I'd say like the vast majority of SDRs, that's the path they want to get into. Most companies, so there's a whole, I guess, separate topic in terms of evaluating which company you want to join as an SDR. But the well-run ones, they do a lot of promoting from within. So they'll promote like the top performing SDR BDRs into these closing account executive roles. So it is a little bit of a funnel where you're going to have a lot more SDR BDRs than you do have AEs. So not everyone is going to get promoted up into that path. Some people will actually stay as an SDR BDR. Like that is becoming an option that's more and more prevalent. Companies are realizing that some people enjoy that role more so than the AE role. So they're allowing people to stay in that role, for their career, maybe becoming like an expert in like outbound prospecting, and then, managing and building out an SDR team as well. Then like the third option is actually just going into an adjacent role. So me and you, we know actually a good number of our colleagues that we used to work with in sales at Google, for example, and they moved on to other parts of the company. One of them, I think, went into like the YouTube team. Another one went into, I think, the VR team and stuff. Yeah, exactly. So lots of different options there. The great thing is a lot of the skills that you learn in sales are transferable. So even if you're not going to be in a customer facing sales role, as you move into like any corporate role, you're going to be doing actually a lot of selling internally. So these skills are all like super transferable. And for like the really big organizations, they usually give you a good amount of like internal mobility too.
Yeah, that's why I get so excited about the SDR role, is because it's the greatest way to lower the barrier to entry to an amazing company and get skills that, regardless of if you stay in the sales path, those skills will serve you in anything you do, right? Because like Dan Pink has that book, To Sell is Human, where he talks about all the non-sales selling roles. Like if you're a product leader, you're in HR, and especially entrepreneurs, they're selling all the time. And so I've also seen, Tom, folks like back in my Oracle days that became analysts. They were super analytical, but they did well as an SDR and network, so they could move to that position or move into marketing.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I was going to say, and then I've also known some people too that they decide they want to be more technical, for example. So they might move into like a sales engineering role or a solutions architect role. So yeah, a ton of different options there for sure.
Let's talk money for a bit, right? Like what, based on the data, is the typical like base salary and on target earnings? That's one question. And I'll hold off. I have a follow-up, but what's typically expected?
Sure. Yeah. So if we're talking about like the entry level, SDR, BDR, what I've been seeing through my like network is, and also through different data sources like RepView, nowadays companies are offering between like 60 to 100K OTE. I've seen a couple that have been a little bit higher at like 105 or 110K OTE. That's for individuals with basically zero experience moving into the role. And of course, the pay also depends a bit based on the company and also based on location as well. And for people that aren't familiar, OTE, that's on target earnings. That's how much you would earn if you hit like 100% of your goal or 100% of your quota or the targets that were set by your manager. As an SDR, BDR, usually you're on like a 80-20 or a 70-30 split. So 80 to 70% of that number is going to be a guaranteed base salary that's, paid out either monthly or biweekly. And then the rest, and then the bonus, depending on the company, you either get that, on a monthly basis, or you might get that on a quarterly basis or even semi-annual basis. It kind of depends on the company there. But that's one of the big differentiators with like tech sales or software sales, is that this role is not like a commission only sales role, right? So that's one of like the bigger differences, is you actually do have a pretty substantial base salary, and there's a variety of different reasons why they do that.
And it's cool that you have an upside where you can work harder and smarter and make more money. As an SDR, you can hit a bonus, but then you go to AE, which is a whole different story we could talk about. You could maybe have uncapped commission. And I know you've had some big time W-2, not checks, but well, I guess so. Yeah. But so let's talk about hitting the bonus as an SDR. What goes into like the metrics that you need to hit? Like how is success measured? And I could put words in your mouth, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah. So this is going to vary quite a bit from sales org to sales org. So this is one of the questions that I always tell my mentees to go ahead and ask during the interview process is, asking, the sales manager, how is success actually measured? So I've seen a lot of different sales plans for SDRs. Some of them, they only look at number of like opportunities generated. Other ones, they look at, meetings set for the AEs. Sometimes they even have a combination of meetings set plus like a percentage of revenue from deals closed. So it's gonna vary quite a bit. It's gonna depend on also like what product you're selling. So some products are more transactional, smaller deal values, like 10 to 20K deals that can close in like 30 to 45 days. That's gonna be very different than a complex enterprise software platform that has 6 to 12 month deal cycle. So in those cases, it's a little harder to measure the success of the SDR BDRs. You don't necessarily want the SDRs and the BDRs to be waiting around 12 months to get paid, on a deal that they source that potentially may or may not even get closed.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. We could dig into the skill set required to like actually hit your numbers. I would like to do that, but also before going into that, how about equity? Are you seeing like at certain companies, whether it's a big enterprise, you get RSUs or a startup, that SDRs are able to come in their first role and actually negotiate some equity as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So equity is, this answer is going to depend on the company. So, some private companies don't give out equity, or they don't give out equity to sales. It just kind of depends on the culture there. But in general, for most of the tech companies, they do give equity in one way or another. Like the publicly traded companies, a lot of times they do it as like RSUs or stock grants. So you get a vested amount of stock. So for example, when I joined Google, I think it was like, this was before the split, but in my package it was like 160 shares, which at the time I think it was like $9.50 a share for Google, and it was vested over 4 years. So they basically gave me, part of my pay package was 160K in Google stock, and it was paid on a I guess it was a yearly basis. So it was like there's a vesting schedule, meaning in this case you didn't get any of it until you worked there for a year, and then after that I think it was actually a quarterly vesting. So then after that I got a quarter of the yearly amount, and it was just kind of added to my brokerage account there.
How about that? 160K in stock,
Mm-hmm.
and Google's not a bad stock. And if you performed well, didn't you have a chance to kind of refresh and negotiate over time, even higher, more stock?
Yep, exactly. So yeah, like the big tech companies and most like the bigger startups too, they do like an annual or semi-annual review process. So you do a performance review. It's a combination of your manager's feedback as well as like a self-performance review. And then based on that and based on your sales performance, you can be eligible for base raise increases, level increases, and then like additional stock as well too. Because if they give you stock up front when you first join, then they usually have a mechanism to give you more stock on a yearly basis, because they want to avoid a situation where, let's say if you have like a 4-year stock grant and you've been there for 4 years, if they don't give you more stock, then year 5 you're going to have a pretty significant decrease in pay. So they try to avoid that.
So I have a path I want to take this conversation down, but we did get a question from Jesse Kaufman. Thank you. Any comments on moving between market segments? So, like commercial to enterprise, strategic and select accounts, like what are your thoughts on navigating between those and the differences and what it takes, and maybe where the best place to be is?
Sure. So yeah, so best place, I think it's going to depend on, your selling style, maybe your preference. I know some sellers that really enjoy kind of having a large number of accounts that they're working from. So that way they're not just like tied into like 1 or 2, key accounts. It's a different selling motion, selling to like, smaller startups or smaller companies versus like Fortune 500s, which have a lot of moving parts. A lot of decision makers that are involved. These sales processes can get very drawn out. And then also in those roles too, people are typically covering those accounts for like several years because it takes time to build those relationships. So you don't necessarily have to move up market. I know a lot of like the bigger tech companies, so they have like a job ladder system. And it used to be, I think maybe like, I don't know, like 10 years ago, like you had to move up from like SMB to enterprise to like strategic accounts to maximize your earning potential. But nowadays, most of the time, like you can still get to like the highest levels as an individual contributor, regardless of the market segment that you're in.
Really insightful. And Jesse says, thank you, Tom. Appreciate you taking the question. So that's what I love, guys. If you have questions, fire them away. We want to make the most of your time and get you the insight that you need. I remember, Tom, at Google Cloud, and I still partner with Google Cloud. I'm at a consulting firm. So I knew folks who went from enterprise where you can have monster deals, but you're limited to like 5 or so accounts. And they went to the corporate segment, which was, you could call it a step below, but you still had some pretty big multi-million-dollar deals, and you had more volume, you had more at bats. Because in the enterprise or select, it's feast or famine. Like, what if it's the accounts you've been given are just, you know what I'm saying? Have you found that to be the case? Sometimes it's better to have like more at bats.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, it depends. Yeah, exactly. Like you mentioned, if you only have like, 2 accounts, for example, like that was my situation. If they're factoring a specific growth rate on those like accounts, for your quota. So if you only got like 2 accounts and like one of them has like some pretty significant headwinds due to like macroeconomic factors like outside of your control and outside of their control, then yeah, you really can't do anything about it because you don't have any other accounts that you can like use as a backup to try to like fill in that gap in your quota attainment.
So I think that sales has taught me, and I'm sure it's taught you, how to handle ambiguity, and thrive in a sometimes a chaotic economic climate when something like a pandemic or downturn happens, and to like take ownership for outcomes. And you got to hit your numbers, and if you don't, you're in trouble. I'm curious, what are the skill sets? Well, hold on, the qualities and the skill sets needed to succeed in tech sales. And let's go back now through the lens of you're trying to break in with no experience. And I realize qualities and skill sets are different, right? So how about, what are the qualities needed to be successful that hiring managers look for?
Sure. So I think some of like the main qualities that the hiring managers are looking for, one, are you coachable, right? So especially if you're coming in as SDR, BDR, there's gonna be a lot to learn. And, sales processes vary also from organization to organization. And also companies will frequently pivot their go-to-market plans. They'll come out with new products, new offerings, or you might even get like different managers. So they're looking to see, are you coachable? Are you a fast learner? Do you have a natural sense of curiosity in terms of like asking questions about why things are done a certain way within like the sales process, but then also having a sense of curiosity for digging into your customers' pain points. And then kind of like, I think the fourth big one probably would be just having like a solid work ethic. So in sales, especially, it's consistency is extremely important. So having like a consistent, being consistent in terms of like your effort and also consistent and consistency in terms of like your workflow, in terms of how you approach your territory, are going to be really important. So, within the job, you have a lot of different responsibilities. One of them is going to be, continuously, finding new business, building out your pipeline, maintaining that pipeline. So they want to, they're looking for people that, can put in like the right amount of activity that they need to do on a daily basis in order to succeed. Because a lot of times actually, being successful in a sales role, you can kind of like work backwards from your goal, right? So if you need to hit like, X hundreds of thousands of dollars in close business, if how many opportunities actually close, what the average value of that opportunity is, how many leads you need to work to convert into an opportunity, how many outreaches do you need to make for each lead to turn that into an opportunity. You can like work backwards and figure out, all right, this is what I need to do on a daily basis. And if I do that, there's a pretty high chance that I'm going to hit my number there. So they're kind of looking for people that can think that way as well.
Coachability, being able to be goal-oriented and reverse engineer from a goal down to behaviors and what you need to be able to do. Those are some great qualities. And what am I missing, Tom? You mentioned, work ethic. Work ethic, no question, right?
Yep. And then, yeah, then curiosity. I can't remember if he said that one again or not.
Yep. No, thank you. I want to kind of repeat back to hammer it home, guys, like embody these things. Because you can choose to say today, even if you're not embodying these qualities, I'm going to start embodying these qualities and developing experience in these areas. You can choose to be curious. And you're so right, Tom, on that one. Because one thing I realized getting into sales is the pressure's off. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. That actually might, limit your potential. It might lead to not listening to the customer to truly put yourself in their shoes and understand their situation and how you can help. So thanks for sharing a look under the hood on the qualities that folks look for, hiring managers in particular, when people are trying to get into tech sales. Later on, we can talk a little bit about interviewing, and because these folks are going to get some questions. Tell me about a time you're coachable, and we can dig into it, but I'm going to put a pin in it. Because we got another question. When trying to decide between companies, or actually like which market to go into. So cybersecurity, cloud, data analytics. I'm throwing things out there, Tom. Finding great market fit and great training as an entry-level person they're saying, what factors should we think about in terms of markets, training? I think the question at the end of the day is, how do we think about picking the right company to start a career at?
Yep. So yes, there's a lot of things to consider when you're like figuring out like what companies do you want to apply for and work for. So there's tools out there you could use like Glassdoor and like LinkedIn to go ahead and look at like reviews for these companies and learn about people's experiences there. Other tools you can use, for example, are like RepView. So RepView, they're one of my partner companies that I work with pretty frequently on the channels. They're kind of like Glassdoor, but specifically for sales organizations and mostly focused on tech sales. So you can use that tool to go ahead and look up companies and see which companies have like the highest ranked sales organizations from a leadership perspective, from a product market fit perspective, training and enablement. So for like that first role, what I really encourage people to do is focus on ones that are going to provide a lot of training and mentorship and support, because you're going to be learning a lot within this first role. So the first company doesn't necessarily need to be like your dream company either, but for your first like 2 or 3 years within your sales career, you should be building like these foundational skills that are going to allow you to basically take you to the next level after that. So what that means is you're probably going to avoid super small startups where you're like the first 5 or first 10 sales hires, because a lot of times they're not going to have like a bunch of training and enablement and support mechanisms in there to help you succeed. Those types of companies are probably going to be a better fit for people that already know what they need to do day one in a sales role to be successful. So what that's going to pretty much leave you with is larger late stage startups. I would say 2,000 employees or more. And then, larger publicly traded, tech companies as well. Those are usually like a pretty safe bet for the first one to go ahead and focus on. And then in terms of like where you further want to focus on for your job search, I think part of it's going to probably depend on like your personal interests. So if you are, really interested in like cybersecurity, or you're interested in DevOps, or you're really excited about cloud, go ahead and like pick one of those and then tailor your search around that. So instead of just applying for 100 random tech startups, right? If you can go ahead and narrow it down to like a specific vertical, that's going to make your prep a lot easier, because if you're going to be doing interview prep for a cybersecurity interview, it's going to be pretty similar for other cybersecurity companies versus having to bounce around from one product to another, and with your prep there.
So guys, check out RepView. Like, there's my puppy. Like Tom mentioned, some incredible data on the leadership and sales culture at top tech companies. Right, Tom. What other data points, just to refresh us on like what the type of data they can find?
Yeah. So for RepView, for example, you can look at, so they have anonymous ratings from sales reps within the company. So on RepView, they have like an overall rating for the companies, for the sales organization, and then they also break it down based on leadership, for the leadership team, product market fit, training and enablement, additional tools and supports for the sales reps, then also percentage of reps that are hitting their number. So that's also going to be something that's important, because there's some sales organizations where 80% of the reps are hitting their number, and that's great. You want to hit your number because that's where you make the most money. And there's other organizations that, for one reason or another, only maybe, let's say 30% of the reps might be, hitting their goals. So, in sales, there's a couple things that are going to determine your success, but timing and territory, they say are really important, which is definitely true. You could be the best sales rep, but if you end up, joining a company where like the product really doesn't drive well with customers and they're having trouble getting traction, or you're just assigned a territory that historically hasn't done well, then you're going to be fighting like an uphill battle there.
And that's why it's so important to see like what percentage of sellers are hitting their number, and RepView touches on that, right?
Yeah, they do. And then they, depending on like how many reviews they have, that you'll also get like a little bit of a breakdown from like SMB, mid-market, or enterprise. But that's also, I kind of touch on this within my like the free course program or whatever. I also talk about like types of questions that you should be asking the hiring manager. So this would be, a great question to ask is, how's your team been performing overall? You can even ask questions about like, what's the highest level of attainment that one of your reps on your team have hit. Usually, like if like a sales manager has a strong track record, they're proud when they have like a rep on their team that is able to, for example, get like have a 7-figure W-2 year, and they'll often like cite that during like interviews and stuff. So
I like that you're encouraging folks to qualify the company for themselves. It's not just like you're desperately going to any company just to get a job, but you're intentional in your search, you're focused. And when you get into these interviews, you're also asking to see if it's the type of culture you want to be in.
Yep.
You're set up to succeed. So I read a book, Essentialism, and it talks about the disciplined pursuit of less but better. And I think that's in a way what you're embodying when you say, find out, do you want cybersecurity? Do you want data analytics? And focus on companies in that realm. I feel like that will lead to a more effective preparation cycle and ultimately application cycle. And so do you feel like, from your vantage point, having worked at the best companies and been in this industry for a while, do you think there are a couple categories that you would focus on if you were breaking into tech sales all over again?
Yeah. So, I mean, doing it again, I think I ended up kind of probably focusing on like the right areas, maybe just coincidentally, but, cloud has been historically strong, and I think it's still going to be strong. Like cloud adoption is pretty much universal across most companies at this point. But there's a ton of expansion opportunities that are still there as well. Cybersecurity is one that I enjoyed working in. That, there's always going to be a demand for cybersecurity tools. This is basically any service or software that's like a budgeted line item for companies is going to be sticking around. Like companies are not able to really just cut out all their cybersecurity tools because of various regulations that require them to have these practices in place. So it's going to be like a pretty safe, like recession-proof field there. But I'm going to probably circle back and say the most important thing really is just your own like personal interest. So it's way easier to sell a product or sell for a company that you're personally like excited about. So, you're not really, if you want to be successful in this field, you're not going to be just like an order taker and kind of treat these things as transactional sales. You're going to be developing relationships with the customer. You're going to be becoming like an industry expert within your specific field. You're going to be keeping up with all of the latest industry news and providing like great, insights and intel to your prospects. So that's going to be probably like I would say like the biggest thing. Everyone has different levels of interest. Maybe you're really passionate about clean tech, for example. There's a bunch of like software companies that are around basically environmentalism and building tools that enable enterprises to meet like their various green initiatives. So if that's something that you're super excited about, passionate about, definitely go ahead and pursue that. So there's thousands of like startups out there. So that's another part that you can kind of do with within like your job search is There's a website I remember. I think I referred to someone. I think it was topstartups.io. So this one was like a pretty cool site. It's I forgot what the data points are, but there's a ton of startups out there that people just aren't familiar with, right? So this one right here, I guess they have 1,217 startups that are actually funded by like top tier investment firms. So that's another thing that I talk about is how do you identify a good startup versus like a questionable startup. So one of them is if it's funded by like a tier one venture capital firm, usually that's a good indicator that they've got something, pretty solid that has some like potential there. So this one, they have like the newest startups funded by top investors, and you can actually filter things, based on like where is the company headquarters located, what industry are they in? Are they in, for example, some of the industries that they have are ed tech, fintech, gaming, crypto, biotech, analytics, media, retail. So a lot of different ones there. So try to like think of, do a brainstorming exercise. Think about like, what companies, what tools are you most interested in? What fields are you in? And then you can go ahead and like use an aggregator like this to go ahead and filter it down and then kind of come up with like a list of companies that you think might be interesting to sell for.
Yeah, for some people, the startup life might be the move. It's risky. It's a little more ambiguous, but especially if you want to be an entrepreneur and startup founder, then it's a great path, and guys, I linked techsalestom.com again. So you'll be able to check out Tech Sales U's course because Emmanuel was asking for the link and it's there, and I'll make sure as it floats out in the YouTube feed, we get that link there. Tom's TikTok is in there as well, which also has all the resources. So I also just linked topstartups.io. The great suggestion, Tom. I'd actually never heard of that myself. And I've been, in this space for a bit. So great resource. Chris Orlob, another thought leader like yourself in this space, he was on recently and he said, the gap between us and our dreams is our skills, right? It's not time. And I'm trying to think, like early on in a career, this is my thought, is that we should focus more on a play opportunity that will develop our skills, which we trade in for money later on, versus just focusing on the highest starting pay. I'm kind of, it's a leading question, but do you think that's like a good way to think, focus when it comes to our criteria for a first job opportunity when we're breaking into tech sales?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, the tenure in tech in general, average tenure is, fairly low. I mean, it's not too uncommon for people to change jobs every like 2 to 3 years. Sometimes even sooner, depending on the circumstances, especially like in sales. So don't, I think when we're like trying to evaluate different offers, different companies, look at the foundational skills and training that they're going to give you. So let's say like, you've got like a company that you're more excited about, but then there's another one that's like maybe like a safer bet that's been around for a while, but they have like really good training and support. They have like a 6-week sales training program. They're going to pay for this like outside training that's going to, they're on an outside trainer to like kind of come in and help you hone your skills. That's going to be very like valuable, probably more valuable than like, let's say like a 10K higher OTE for like this other company. The other thing you can look at too, to kind of consider is if your personal goal, let's say, is to become like a high level AE at one of like the big tech companies, right? It's a lot easier to get into those roles by getting in at a lower level and then getting promoted from within and moving up versus trying to come in as an external hire. So you may potentially be in a situation where it may be beneficial to go ahead and take a position that's like maybe a step lower in like your dream company, and then invest like the 1 or 2 years, in that role, and then move up there.
Yeah, I really, I'm glad you hit on that because I was going to ask you about it. I think it is smartest long-term to humble ourselves and go for an SDR role if we're trying to break into tech sales for the first time to get into the right type of company rather than trying to start out as an AE and make more money at a company that is not necessarily going to set us up long-term. Because I've had people reach out from the channel saying, I have a master's in education, or I this and that, I've sold here. But it's a different realm, isn't it? And that's an amazing thing to build on. But honestly, like education doesn't even necessarily prepare you for selling. It's a different beast. And maybe I'm wrong, but what are your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's not really too relevant anymore. The one exception would be if you're going to be selling something that's like super specialized or super technical. They may have a preference to having people that have like the industry experience there or formal education in that space. Like, for example, if you want to get into, well, I guess we're talking about tech sales here, but if we're looking at like other sales roles, like bio, or I guess maybe even related to that, let's say like a biotech company that there's like a startup that's has a software stack for biotechs to use. They may, prefer to have sales reps that have a formal education in that space, just that way they can talk to their prospects and talk to their prospective companies in a better way. But for the most part, yeah, like what's most valuable, especially in a sales role, is your most recent experience. That's what they're going to be asking you the most questions about on your interview. Your most recent sales performance, like how'd you do the last few quarters, last few years? What's your track record there? So that college degree maybe would help when you're trying to like land that first job. Like if you can leverage like your alumni network, or if you just went to like a really great school, it can give you a leg up. But then after that, no one's really asking or looking at that unless you went to like like a Harvard or something like that, which is going to be helpful in most cases, just from a name perspective.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like I went to Georgetown University, solid school, and it really was the brand and the network that and Oracle came to recruit from there that helped me. But it's not like it's not like being intellectually smart really helps us in sales. It actually can be a hindrance. It's more emotional intelligence. And man, I wish schools taught more of that, like EQ, and sales skills. I noticed like 4% of universities, Tom, are teaching formal sales courses. And yet that's the biggest skill gap with companies is they're like, we want people who can sell. It's just interesting,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Cause like they, traditionally, yeah, there hasn't been like college degrees focused around selling. But I've been hearing that it's starting to pick up traction more. Actually, I think, one of the people I used to work with at Google, he actually just joined as an adjunct professor at, I forget which university, to teach like a sales course. But I think like, yeah, they're having some sales courses, but no like professional selling degree, which I think we may see more in the future, but which would be great because in most cases, people are just learning everything on the job. They're getting trained by their manager or by like the sales enablement team. But if we could like go ahead and build some of these like foundational skills ahead of time, because these are super important skills in most actually career paths.
And that's why we have something like Tech Sales U, which guys check out, right? To fill in that gap that you might not get in college. So Jesse, I see your question, but it's time to go rapid fire into the meat and potatoes of breaking into tech sales, like going through the tactics step by step. 43 minutes in, I feel like I'm on a sales call with a top executive here, top thought leader. I want to make sure we land the plane on time, Tom. So let's start with like, we figured out kind of where we want to break in at. We have an understanding of the role, and now it's time to, tweak the resume. I guess one question is how important is it to build a compelling narrative to translate your past experience to tech sales? Like how does that fit into a resume? Like how do you think about the narrative you want to tell in the resume?
Yeah, so I think the narrative is important because even if let's say you're applying for your first like sales job, and even if you don't have like direct like sales experience, hopefully in most cases you can try to like quantify the like the actual performance metrics for your prior jobs. So sales managers or hiring managers, they're going to be looking for people that think in objective ways. So let's say if you have, I don't know, retail experience, right, on your resume, if you can go ahead and quantify that and do like actually like write out your performance in terms of like hard numbers or percentages, that's going to be already like a good way to kind of like start basically refactoring your resume into basically developing it into like a sales minded individual.
Do you have any other key tidbits on how to create a compelling resume, especially when you have no experience beyond highlighting objective metrics?
Yeah. So I guess if you have no experience, I would say probably the most important thing, especially nowadays in the current job market, is actually more so like the referrals that you can get. So you can have like a great resume, but the reality is entry level positions are getting a ton of applications. You know, maybe if you've already like looked for the individuals that are asking, but you can, you know, on LinkedIn for jobs, sometimes they'll list like how many applicants they'll have. And for entry level roles, I think I've seen some that have had like 1,000 applications or whatever for a SDR or BDR. So um, optimizing the resume important, but actually building out a network and then getting referrals probably even more important. And then maybe an extension of that is not just optimizing your LinkedIn or not just optimizing your resume, but also optimizing your LinkedIn profile is going to be important, because that way I always tell people to think about your LinkedIn as kind of like a sales page for yourself. And if you do it right, really you're doing like SEO or search engine optimization for recruiters, because recruiters are going to be using LinkedIn to find who potentially might be a good fit for the sales hires that they're looking to fill.
So guys, don't get too caught up on the resume. Focus on the LinkedIn, networking, and then of course interviewing. You gotta be able to sell yourself in the interviews. So to your point, Tom, on SEO and tweaking wording on LinkedIn, that's what I did to get a job at Google. I had a recruiter, Connor, reach out to me after I tweaked some of the language to match up what they were looking for in the job description. And I had the relevant experience, because as we know, you don't just, you have to have the experience to get into Google. They're very data driven. Yeah. But to your point, like how can people be optimizing their LinkedIn? Like, could you share a couple concrete tips in addition to like tweaking the language to match the job description of like a role you're going for?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll admit I'm not a LinkedIn expert. There's whole pages and creators that are focused just on kind of LinkedIn optimizations, but you know, a couple things you're going to be looking for. You know, one is like the headline. So within the headline itself, there's a couple key things you want to capture. One is the title or the position that you're looking for, include something about the industry or vertical that you're looking to be in, and then highlighting some of like your top skills. So if you're trying to figure out like what keywords you should be using or what skills you should be calling out, you can basically work backwards from the jobs that you're looking to apply for, right? So they actually kind of tell you specifically. So if you go ahead and just look up different listings for SDRs or sales development representatives, you know, they'll tell you specifically like, all right, these are the requirements, these are the traits that we're looking for. So go ahead and like basically use those as kind of hints in terms of like what they're specifically looking for. Because like you mentioned, in terms of like refactoring your resume or tailoring it for sales roles, you know, if you have like, I don't know, 3 prior work experiences, there's so many different ways that you can spin that in terms of like how you want to, like what things you want to bring attention to. So go ahead and like use those like job postings as like kind of a study guide in terms of what phrasing you can use yourself.
So Artur asked another question about networking, how best to approach it. And I mean, this is the meat and potatoes right now, networking and interviewing. Mm-hmm. So let's say you don't have connections. Like it seems like that was the case, Tom, with you. You didn't really have much connections to make it happen. How do you even begin to think about manufacturing those connections and getting referred in and jump outside the traditional application process?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a couple ways. Like one, let's say if you did go to university, definitely leverage like the alumni network. So sometimes they'll have career centers and then job search assistant programs that they can go ahead and help you with in terms of like getting referrals or connections into target companies. The other way is you can even, like, for example, LinkedIn is going to be probably like one of the best tools for networking. So let's say like you can use LinkedIn to find individuals at the company that you want to apply for that went to like perhaps the same, you know, school that you went to, right? Or went to like the same like hometown. So you want to find like some sort of common, you know, connector between you and the person that you're hoping to get the the referral from. So university is often like a good one for that one too. The other option is you can join, let's say like, there might, depending on the city that you're in, there might be like, a sales meetup or like a Toastmasters club. Toastmasters, for people that aren't aware, is like I think it's basically a nonprofit. It's like a public speaking club, and they have charters in most like major cities.
I'm going tomorrow morning, Tom, 7 a.m. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I was gonna say there's probably a lot of sales folks that are in there. Is that yeah.
Great point, man. That's outside the box. I didn't really think of even advising folks from a networking perspective to join Toastmasters. Partly as just like, it's good to develop your communication skills, but these are creative strategies. Your alumni network, local organizations. Any thoughts on?
Oh, and then the other way too is so when you think about like LinkedIn, you think about like who's most active on it, right? So salespeople are usually pretty active on it because they're using it for their job. So if you have a company that you want to go ahead and apply for, a good potential target as well in terms of who you might reach out to would be new SDRs or new BDRs, right? So people that have been in the role, for like 6 months or 12 months. They tend to be a bit more responsive to like LinkedIn messages or, being willing to like share and provide some guidance. And one reason for that is most companies do a referral bonus. So they'll pay employees anywhere from like $500 to a couple $1,000, depending on the company.
Yeah.
Or for a successful referral that results in a hire. So one of the perks, I guess, in terms of like targeting SDRs or BDRs for referrals is that because they're in a sales role, that they are probably a little bit more money motivated than others. So there's kind of a few different things there that kind of work in your favor.
Yeah, so that's a good insight. Look at SDRs who are fresh in the role.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be more likely to respond, and to them too, it's more meaningful to get that couple $1,000 bonus. I've seen some companies have $3,000 referral bonuses, or MongoDB gives equity. I mean, you can like help them. It's like, hey, I want to help you get paid. Like, if you help me out, and I'm like you said earlier, I have work ethic. I'm curious. I'm coachable. You come into humility and appreciate the opportunity and respect it. Like, you could do some good things. But anything you wanted to riff off on that, Tom?
No, I think that's pretty much the main thing there. Yeah. So the new hires can definitely be good, and then the other thing too that's great is you could either identify like a really good sales opportunity from that, or you might even get some tips that perhaps maybe it's not the best time or best organization to join. So
that's a good point.
Even if you already are interviewing, I always recommend still reach out to other fellow reps that would be on the team that you're joining. Or one thing that I've done as well is reaching out to former sales reps that recently left the organization, and they may or may not respond. But there was one situation where actually I was kind of like tipped off that they were facing some pretty significant headwinds, and that's why like this sales rep left. And so I got some great insight from that individual that I probably wouldn't have gotten from the sales manager or the hiring manager, because they're trying to get you to join the team.
Yeah, that's something I didn't really think about, is reach out to someone who just left, and you can figure out like, why did they leave? What if it's a sinking ship, and you definitely don't want to be hopping on a sinking ship. So let's talk real quick about tactically reaching out. We did get a question from Artur, another great question. Thanks for your curiosity and throwing out some good questions for us to field. But before answering that, what's an example of like, if you LinkedIn message me to get my time to see it, learn about the opportunity, and maybe get referred, like how would you frame the message when you reach out?
Sure. So I always like tailor my LinkedIn messages and my outreach. So what you want to find is you want to make it obvious that you're not just copying and pasting the same message to a bunch of people, because it's pretty obvious when you get one of those and you don't really feel like responding to it. So the ones that I respond to are the ones where I can tell that they actually did their research on me, and they reference either something that I've done or posted, and they show some genuine curiosity. So for the individual that you're reaching out to, either look at, did they post something recently on LinkedIn? Is there something on their profile or their background that you found very interesting? So perhaps, like, let's say if they did go to the same university as you can go ahead and like reference that. Or maybe if you saw in their background, they did like a pretty big career pivot and they went from one industry to another, you can go ahead and reference that and say like, hey, I noticed, or, hey, I'm, exploring positions at this company, notice that you made, the change from this industry, would love to, learn more about your experience and how you were able to make that change yourself.
So how about, cold calling and cold emailing hiring managers? Obviously cold calling is a little more gutsy, but just rapid fire, Tom, what do you think about, that was a question from Archer, cold calling and cold emailing hiring?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, a big portion of like the interview process, even just getting an interview, right, is, you're getting screened out from even just submitting the application. You're getting screened out by the recruiter. And oftentimes that's like assigned to the job posting. From there, they're going to decide whether or not they're even going to show your resume to the hiring manager. So if you can go ahead and just get the direct attention of the hiring manager, they will oftentimes, if they think that you're like a good fit, they'll just directly tell the recruiter, hey, let's go ahead and start interviewing this person. So definitely like a good strategy there to, if you know who the hiring manager is, definitely go ahead and send them like a message and say like, you're interested in the position and would love to learn more or share more about your background. So definitely I recommend doing that. I've had success with that personally in the past. It shows initiative also for the sales manager because they know that you're basically doing what they would expect the sales rep or the SDR to be doing anyway. So it's a good indicator for them.
Final networking question, and then I'm going to try and squeeze in some interviewing, which is definitely important. How do you handle that first networking conversation? Let's say it's with an SDR. I mean, it could be with the hiring manager too, but what's the objective in that networking conversation? Like in terms of like questions you ask and what you want to communicate, knowing that, we're trying to get in the process and bump up the stack of resumes.
Sure. Yeah. So what you want to show is some like genuine curiosity in terms of like what their experience has been. What did they learn in terms of what as they were onboarding into the role? What are some things that maybe they wish they did differently? And I mean, and you want to go into it assuming that people in general want to help other people, right? So people love sharing their experiences, sharing their successes, sharing their failures. So if you go ahead and like approach it that way and just come at it with a genuine sense of curiosity, that's going to be most beneficial as opposed to just kind of right out the gate, just go ahead and like asking for a referral, because you want to show that you're actually being thoughtful in terms of the companies that you're applying for, that you're actually interested there. Then also for the other individual, they also want to kind of make sure that this is a person actually I would enjoy working with, right? So that's another big part of like the whole interview process itself, is that your hiring manager is also just trying to figure out like, hey, is this a person I want to have on my team and be working with them potentially for like years down the road?
Yeah, I was just with my neighbor who's a hiring manager at TikTok, and a little different than our typical cloud sales. And she said exactly that. She's like, I want to work with people that are cool, that I could see myself hanging with, that are into, outside hobbies and like fitness or whatever. And so, by the way, Tom, this happens every time I have an amazing guest like you. We got like 2 minutes. I know you have a family and you have things.
I was gonna say I'm gonna have to hop off, but we can definitely do like a part 2 or something. I think if you want in the future.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I guess as a final thing, since we have like a minute, high level interviewing advice, like there's so much we could unpack, but a couple of your top tips, like looking at the overall interview process, like how to prepare, how to maximize it, how to think about it.
Sure. So top tips: 1, match the energy of the person that's interviewing you. So like I think we touched on it earlier, part of the interview process is just seeing like if you would vibe well with the team, right? So match the energy level of the other individual. That's going to make a big difference. So practice like mirroring. That mirroring is like a common conversational tip. You can go ahead and Google that in terms of how to best do that. 2, The other really big thing is have like a good set of like questions to ask at the end of the interview. So almost always they're going to leave time at the end for you to ask them questions, because this interview it's not meant to be just a one-way interview, them interviewing you. You should also be interviewing them to make sure that it's a good fit. So it can be a very good indicator for them if you come prepared with like really insightful questions, not just kind of, regular questions that, you could ask like any individual. But if you have very specific questions about the role, about the company, about the industry, about the other individual, and have those prepared, that's going to take you very far in the interview process.
Final question. Any thoughts on like how to answer questions, how to prepare? I guess like maybe how to answer questions when you get them to behavioral questions, and then also the importance of closing.
Sure. So there's different ways, different methodologies to phrase your answers, but STAR methodology is a pretty standard one. A lot of companies use that when they evaluate your performance, interview performance. In general, you want to go ahead and, don't just go ahead and blurt out an answer right away. If you need like a little bit of time to think about it, to formulate your thoughts, go ahead and do that. Ask clarifying questions as well. Usually they're open to, providing additional context. That way you can better phrase your answer. And then think about basically your experience and your answer, and make it objective. You're kind of like telling a story. So go ahead and think about like a time that, a personal experience or whatever, and relating that to the question. So briefly summarize like the situation, the problem, what you did, and then what the results were. That's kind of like the basic breakdown of STAR methodology. Yeah.
And so we're going to close this conversation. And any tips on closing in interviews? That's the final question.
Sure. So closing. Yeah. So one of the things, I guess, for closing, and this kind of ties back to the previous one about like follow-up questions, is some of the follow-up questions that I like to do are ones that basically are assuming like you already got the offer. Like, what are some things that you would recommend that like a new hire would do if you were to, start in this position? So basically have your questions almost act as like a closer, and frame it that way. The other thing too is, you can always ask for clarification on like, what does the rest of the interview process look like? Thank the individual for their time, do a follow-up thank you email or LinkedIn message as well.
So guys, speaking of follow-up thank yous on LinkedIn, feel free to send Tom a thank you note, a note of appreciation. Check out Tech Sales Tom on TikTok, linked in the description of this video. Check out Tech Sales U. This was just a taste of the types of things you'll learn that'll help you get your foot in the door in tech sales and set yourself up to maximize your career and your W-2 as well. Tom, thank you for the time, man. So insightful. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your night.
Yep. Thanks, you too, Chris.
All right, y'all. Cheers.